Ladies and gentlemen, over on the More Swag channel, today's video, what I got for you guys is the forgotten history of Warzone. A lot of things in between that you might have missed. Some of you guys will reminisce. Some of you guys will be like, whoa, that was in the game. Make sure you guys drop a like, hit that subscribe button if you hit a nostalgic feeling in your chest. Let's get it cracking.
Since launch, we've seen a lot of features come and go. Likes to pick and choose what items stay and which items leave, and sometimes it's for better and sometimes for worse. So join me as we take a look at the entire history of forgotten features in Warzone. These are the items and features that were in Warzone at one point or another but haven't been brought back in a considerable amount of time, if at all. I'm excluding limited time mode items, so you won't see things like Temp V during the Boys event or playing as a zombie during the Haunting of Verdansk.
Yeah.
But let's get right into it. This was something that they had absolutely no business removing from Warzone.
Yeah, why did they?
The emotes were very mild, especially when compared to other games, but it allowed for the game to have a little more personality, considering we didn't have proximity chat during this state of the game. We also had sprays at this point, which were another small feature that I enjoyed. Even with a couple of exploits like spray painting a soldier on the wall in the gulag to bait enemies, or spray painting your enemy a vibrant color so that way when you fought them in the actual gulag, they stuck out like a sore thumb. I'm not sure the reason for vaulting both of these features, especially when this also would bring in 2 more ways to make money in the shop. The amount of people that would fork over money just to have some stupid hand gesture would be crazy. I guess since this was the only form of communication between enemy players, maybe after they added proximity chat,
why did they take emotes out?
The shield turret was a kill streak that you place down, similar to how you place a guardian down.
The literally stupidest kill streak ever.
A large shield across the front. Even though it had a shield, you were still fairly exposed from the waist down and any angle that wasn't the front as well. Aside from being exposed, despite having a shield, it was super weak and took several shots to down someone, even with a slow fire rate. For obvious reasons, the shield turret was very impractical and had minimal opportunities to be used.
What the fuck?
I think it eventually got some buffs, but definitely nothing too noteworthy.
What did I just
watch? If they were to ever bring this back into Warzone today, it would need a complete rework. I'll sprinkle the sentry turret while I'm here, even though it wouldn't come till way later in Warzone. It basically acted the same way as the sentry turret in multiplayer, but regardless, both of these were pretty forgettable.
They were ass.
Stopping power rounds were in the entirety of Warzone 1, and this was one thing I don't really want to be brought.
Chat, was stopping power a W or L? I actually liked it.
But it buffed your damage by a landslide. Although it was only 1 magazine worth of a buff, it still drove me crazy in that you could hit way more shots than someone with the exact same gun, but they could still end up killing you just because they have the stopping power rounds, which to me just screams imbalance. Not only this, but there were a ton of inconsistencies with the recoil and stopping power rounds. Like some guns would have a massive recoil reduction, like they would literally shoot straighter and have no recoil and still hit super hard, and others their recoil would just be like absolutely crazy and uncontrollable but still hit hard. I don't know, it just didn't really make a lot of sense to me. We'll go ahead and mention nebula rounds while we're here, which were part of like the Vanguard integration.
I hated nebula rounds. Stupid.
They were just more of an annoyance and not necessarily all that broken. I think they eventually got them to a balanced state, but I don't think anybody misses nebula rounds.
Not one bit.
Also, at launch of Warzone 1, there were a bunch of bunkers you could find across Verdansk. However, you couldn't interact with them whatsoever. Well, just a few months later, the access cards to open the bunkers would be added to the game via random loot. These cards were...
That's one thing about Warzone. It had like a lot of like a storyline and personality. You know what I'm saying? Like you followed it. Like it was crazy because like during the first Warzone, you followed this like storyline. You know what I'm saying? Now they just, I feel like they all over the place. I mean, we had King Kong and Godzilla, you know what I mean?
Once inside, you had an insane amount of loot for yourself. I missed this a lot because since it was RNG dependent, it didn't happen every game, so whenever someone in the squad got a key card, the game's objective immediately would revolve around finding the nearest bunker. I know today we have a couple similar things like the Keep in Fortune's Keep or the Ray Gun Room and like the secret bunker in Ashika Island, but having several bunkers across the map that required our specific key card is something that we haven't seen since Verdansk, and that was such a fun little like side adventure you and your squad could take on. Supply choppers were an in-game event which would see a handful of helicopters fly into the map where you could then destroy them for really good loot. It took an insane amount of ammunition and firepower to
I hated them shits.
Inside the crate, you would find a ton of money, a guaranteed grenade launcher, which was actually really nice considering how rare they were at the time, 2 armor boxes, gas mask, and munition boxes as well.
I hated it.
And I guess technically we have seen them in Warzone
so
2
loud
and 3 because you can actually pilot these now, which is really cool, but the whole supply chopper event is no more.
Oh, bring it back.
The specialist bonus was first added during the Die Hard event, and I know I said nothing LTM related is allowed on this list, but the reason I included this is that it would come back a handful of different times and ended up being here to stay. For a period of time, it was purchasable at a buy station for an insane price. Then on Rebirth Island, it was in these deposit boxes for a long time, but regardless of how you acquired it, it was definitely a feature that was here for a while.
I loved it.
We all know that it was in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 multiplayer first, and it granted you every perk in the game. This meant that in Warzone, you saw someone who was aiming at you, you swapped weapons faster, saw people through walls when you shot them, didn't trigger high alert, didn't appear on UAVs, had a tempered vest, resistant to explosives, resistant to stuns and flashes, had a longer sprint, got extra ammo and armor from enemies, gained health immediately after downing someone, restocked lethal and tactical over time, revived teammates faster, saw enemy footsteps, and could see enemy equipment. On top of this, you received all the weapon perks, which include sleight of hand, FMJ, and reduced flinch, just to name a few. And on top of this, I'm pretty sure you also had an overall 10% movement buff, which was just a very solid plus. Needless to say, this was a pretty sought after item to get your hands on in Warzone 1, and we haven't seen specialist bonus in the game since Warzone 1, and I'm honestly not too upset at that. I personally thought it was pretty broken. I mean, I don't mind them bringing it back in like an LTM or something, or like in certain game modes, and they've already teased bringing it back in like this tweet from a couple months ago, so I guess we'll see. Please do not put this in ranked. Alongside the 80s action hero update as a part of Cold War Season 3 Reloaded, they decided to add the combat bow. This was a kill streak that essentially had the same exact properties as the bows from Rise and Drag Zombies from Black Ops 3. Goated Zombies map, by the way. Anyways, it was an explosive tip bow that came with like 6 shots, which was way too many for how good it was. I'm pretty sure it guaranteed a 1 shot on direct impact and had a considerable fire rate. It was also obviously really good for destroying vehicles. All you really had to do was learn how to lead your shot. This was also available on Rebirth Island, which, I mean, you can imagine how that went. Super close range, you don't even really have to aim, just kind of like shoot around them, not even go for direct impact, and you would still win your fight. Maybe with a few more nerfs, the bow can get to a balanced state, but I don't miss it, and I hope it doesn't make a comeback anytime soon. This is kind of a lame entry, but technically we haven't seen pilotable planes return to Warzone since Caldera. I know we have a helicopter, even the giant transport helicopter now, which is also like really cool, but no planes still. I for one don't think planes meshed well in Warzone. I think helicopters are plenty for aerial vehicles, and in Caldera they were significantly overpowered even after some nerfs. It just kind of disrupted the gameplay with an already awful map to begin with. They locked onto enemies for you and were easy to fly.
Chat, was Caldera an awful map? Y'all think so or nah?
The damage was also ridiculous, if I'm not mistaken. It was just a recipe for bad players to feel good about themselves. On the plus, it did make for some cool moments, like riding on the wing mid-air and shooting at the pilot and then taking their plane like a low-tier Battlefield play was kind of neat. This is just another feature I do not think needs to be brought back in Warzone. The PDS was another field upgrade that allowed you to breathe in the gas without having to use a gas mask. It essentially created a little circle of safety from the gas that your teammates could also use. If your team needed to tank some storm damage just to get a game plan together, this was the perfect thing to tide you over. On top of using this, then having your gas mask, then maybe a couple of stims, and then a munitions box to replenish said stims, you can make some of the craziest gas plays of all time. As far as balancing goes, I don't think it's overpowered because if I'm not mistaken, it made a considerably loud noise that other people could hear, often giving away your position. But overall, I cannot wait to have this back in Warzone.
I did like it, yeah. I did like it.
The portable redeploy balloon was a pretty fun concept that didn't stay in Warzone long at all. Being introduced in Season 4 of Vanguard, once Warzone 2 came along, it still hasn't seen a comeback. Redeploy balloons were
ew, look at the colors on that map. Yo, Caldera was... What?
Nice way to expedite your rotations and keep the flow of the game from becoming stale on like the bigger maps. Since this was introduced in Caldera, which most players didn't touch, I don't think we've been able to see these used in their full potential. The overhaul to looting in Warzone 2 wasn't always so seamless. With some trial and error, we got the looting system we know today, but before that, we had a looting system that was significantly more in-depth with the different backpacks. There were medium and large backpacks that increased your inventory size considerably, but also allowed for a third weapon slot. Quick side note, the third weapon slot was an amazing feature that gave the game a little bit more of a battle royale feel that I love. Running your traditional AR and then SMG, and then maybe you have like a sniper or shotgun in your backpack, or if you're like a real sick bastard, maybe an RPG, it just felt so good. As far as how it would fare today, I'm not really sure how that would go down. It would probably be broken, but I think there's a way they could fix it. I don't really know, but I would love to see backpacks make a return to Warzone 3 in some way or another. The Revive pistol was a very small addition that we saw in Warzone 2. It didn't really have any major change in the gameplay itself, but I think it was a fun feature that I saw no reason to get removed. We all know it was pretty simple. You had 4 shots, and all you had to do was shoot at a down teammate, and it would start the revive automatically, with no need to revive them yourself or for them to burn a self-revive. It was convenient if you were being held and just needed to lay suppressing fire as the Revive pistol was working its magic to prevent them from getting thirsty. If you had it in your field upgrade slot, it also acted as a self-revive, which was a nice bonus. However, the absolute funniest feature was that you could actually revive downed enemies with it. With the addition of proxy chat in Warzone 2, this made for some hilarious encounters. And since you can't give up while you're being revived, you could in theory revive someone 4 times without them having a chance to do anything about it, which is the ultimate BM. That's the entire history of forgotten features in Warzone. Hope you all enjoyed, and please let me know if I missed anything. Let me know what features you missed the most.
Yeah, that's insane.